Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jennifer and we talk about scary, spooky, quirky, and sometimes tragic history. And today we're going down a very, very dark rabbit hole. Her story inspired movies like The Exorcism of Emily Rose and The Requiem. Her story is a mix of faith, fear, and science. So light a candle, grab a snack, grab a drink, because today we're traveling to Bavaria, Germany, the 1970s, to visit the terrifying life of Anneliese Michel. Her last name looks like it would be pronounced Michel, but I looked it up on YouTube and I think it was Michel. So Anneliese was born on September 21st, 1952 in this little village, Bavaria, Germany. And let me tell you, her family was devout, like Roman Catholic to the max. Her dad, I think he was training to be a priest, and her mom, Anna, was super religious, like strict old Catholic. The whole family attended mass twice a week. Every week. And it's an interesting backstory because there was a ton of guilt in the family because the mom, Anna, had a child out of wedlock before she had Anneliese, which back in those days was a big, big no-no. I think for her wedding, she even had to wear a black veil instead of a white one. So Anna raised her kids with this extra intensity to make up for her past sins. So Anneliese grew up in this super rigid religious household, going to church all the time, and by all accounts, she was a sweet, shy, and super devout kid. And people loved her. She was really smart, she loved school, and she was just one of those kids that seemed destined for a good and solid life. But things took a dark turn when she became a teenager. So as I said, the backstory is interesting. Her mother in particular, once again, had experienced personal shame due to societal judgment over premarital motherhood and sought redemption through strict religious practices. And this ideology really shaped Anneliese's life. As a teenager, Anneliese was unlike many of her peers. She avoided drinking, smoking, partying, and instead dedicated most of her time praying for particularly the redemption of drug addicts and the less fortunate. And her acts of penance stemmed from her belief that she needed to atone not only for her own sins, but for the perceived sins of her family and others in her community. So she was very sweet, religious, and selfless. So fast forward to 1968, Anneliese is now 16 years old. And this is when things start to get weird. She's at school one day and she collapses, like completely out of nowhere. And when she came to, she had absolutely no memory of what happened. A few months later, it happened again, another blackout, and this time she was home, but she went into a terrifying seizure where her whole body stiffened up. Now, this would also happen in her sleep too, and she said it felt as if someone or something was holding her down, and she would even wet the bed, possibly sleep paralysis or something darker. Her family was obviously freaked out, so they take her to the doctors, they run tests on her, and they eventually diagnose her with temporal lobe epilepsy. Don't know, temporal lobe epilepsy can cause seizures, yes, but it can also lead to some really strange symptoms like hallucinations, intense emotions, and even changes in personality. So doctors put her on medication and she's taking them as directed, but here's the thing, she doesn't get better. She actually gets worse. She said she was seeing terrifying demonic faces, hearing voices that told her she was damned, and oh yeah, she couldn't even stand to be near religious objects anymore. Like crucifixes and holy water made her lose it. She was intolerant to them. She was so miserable, she became depressed and sometimes contemplated taking her own life. And her family starts to think, okay, maybe this thing isn't medical. Remember, they were super religious and they thought this has got to be something evil. By the early 1970s, Anneliese's life was completely unraveling. She couldn't even stay in school because her behavior became so erratic. She'd randomly scream, refuse to eat, and do things that honestly were pretty disturbing. So she'd eat spiders off of the floor of her home. She once bit off the head of a dead bird that she found. And there's also this one account where she apparently licked her own urine off of the floor. So yeah, I'd be pretty scared. At this point, her parents are desperate, so they keep taking her to the doctors, but nothing worked. I mean, because it has to have been a 180. She was a sweet, smart, selfless young girl, and she just turns into... So naturally, they turned to church. They asked a bunch of local priests for help, but back then the church had really strict rules about exorcisms for some reason. I think around that time is when the first Exorcist actually came out. So the whole idea of them became popular, and it was just not good attention for the church. So the bishop denies. I mean, you can't just be like, hey, my daughter's acting weird, can you send over a priest? There's this whole process where they had to rule out all the medical issues first. But then Father Ernest Alt comes into the picture. He was a priest who believed Annalise was 100% possessed. He said she didn't act like someone who was suffering from epilepsy and was convinced that demons were involved. Eventually, in 1975, the family got permission for an official exorcism, but this had to remain a secret from the public. Okay, so here's where things get really intense. I'm like starting to get goosebumps just thinking about it. So September 4th, 1975 was the first one performed. The exorcisms were led by Father Arnold Renz and Father Ernest Alt. And over the next 10 months, they performed 67 sessions on Annalise. Yeah. 67. Some of these sessions lasted up to 4 hours, and most of the time they would take place in her bedroom. And let me tell you, what they recorded during those exorcisms is absolutely horrifying. So they taped everything, and in these recordings you can hear Annalise growling, screaming, and speaking in multiple voices. And I'll include the recordings here. They are scary, so if it gets a little too much, definitely skip over it.
Im Namen deines Sohnes, den Jungfrau, im Namen Jesu, befehle ich dir auszufahren
Chills. She claimed to be possessed not by one, not by two, but several demons. She stated their names to be Lucifer, Cain, Judas, Iscariot, Nero, and even Hitler himself. During these sessions, she'd be chained to a bed or chairs, and Annalise would contort her body in ways that didn't seem humanly possible. And she reportedly displayed superhuman strength and had to be restrained by several people. And she was so tormented that she stopped eating because she believed the demons wouldn't let her. And at one point she said that this is what one of the demons said, quote, "People are dumb as pigs. They think it's all over after death." End quote. By mid-1976, Annalise was in really bad shape. She was malnourished, dehydrated, and physically exhausted from the constant exorcisms. I mean, 67 of them, 4 hours long, and you're contorting your body, you're tied down. I just can't even imagine. And her last words were, "Mother, I'm afraid." On July 1st, 1976, she passes away in her home, and at that time she weighed only 68 pounds. The autopsy did show that she died from dehydration and malnutrition. Of course, my camera would die, so here we are, we're back. So after her death, her parents and the two priests were charged with negligent homicide. The trial was a media sensation. The defense obviously argued that Annalise Annalise had been possessed and that the exorcisms were necessary. The parents were actually defended by one of the best lawyers in the country, who was also notorious for defending Nazi war criminals, and the priests had their lawyers paid for by the church. They even played the horrifying audio tapes that they recorded in court, but the prosecution argued that the church and her family essentially let her starve to death. The church said that they absolutely needed to do the exorcisms and that by death they freed her soul from the demons. But the parents at first didn't think so, since her body wasn't decomposing as normal. So they actually had her body exhumed, and to their surprise, her body was decomposing, so everything was normal. In the end, all four were found guilty, but they got off with suspended sentences. The parents didn't get jail time. The court kind of ruled that they had suffered enough, and the priests did get 6 months, which they never served, so the church was definitely protecting them. And today the parents and both priests are all passed now. Today Annalise's grave is in Klingenberg, behind their home where she passed, and it has been quite the attraction. People leave flowers, prayers, and rosaries, but her story still sparks so much debate. Was this a case of severe mental illness that was tragically mishandled, or was it a genuine possession? What gets me is how we just still don't know. I mean, those tapes, they're chilling. How can you explain those? And then the medical records, I mean, they're also compelling. So it's just one of those cases that leaves you questioning everything. So that's the story of Annalise Michel. I'm pretty sure I'm butchering her last name. I'm sorry. It's heartbreaking, it's terrifying, and it's a stark reminder of how thin the line between faith, science, and fear can be. What do you guys think? Was it possession, or was she failed by the people that were supposed to help her? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And until next time, bye guys.